Hello everyone and welcome to the CIH podcast. My name is Gill and I am the Strategic Engagement Manager at the Chartered Institute of Housing. Today's podcast is focusing on celebrating CIH members and in particular celebrating CIH Fellowship. CIH Fellowship is the highest grade of CIH membership and is an honoured class of membership which is recognising highly experienced professionals who have made a significant contribution to the housing profession. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by three fantastic CIH members, and I'll introduce you to these one by one. First of all, I'm joined by David Sice. David is an Executive Director at Solo Housing and a CIH Life member and Fellow. Barrington Billings is the Director of Operations at Tuntum Housing and a CIH Fellow member, and also a former CIH President. And we're also joined by Gill Donoghue, who is at Caledonia Housing and is also a fellow member of CIH. So if I can just take the opportunity to welcome you all and thank you for your time today. It's lovely to see the three of you. So first of all, this is a question to everybody. And Gill, if I could just address this to you sort of in the first place, your first instance. So let's start at the beginning. I know that all of you have been members of CIH for a number of years. Why did you become a CIH member when you first joined, Gill?
So I came into the CIH membership as part of completing my postgraduate in housing studies at Stirling University back in the 90s. And the postgrad was a sort of 2-year course that included practical placements, and the people who helped coordinate those placements tended to have a relationship and involvement with the Institute of Housing. So that was introduced at that point. When I then completed that, it just felt like the right thing to be recognised as part of a profession once I'd done my postgrad. And in my first role, which was in policy and research, I had a really brilliant mentor. I had great support to complete my test of professional practice, I think, as it was at the time, and to become a member as a sort of working person post being a student member. So I did reflect that that's more than 30 years ago now. So I think the roots have probably changed, but I suppose the kind of drivers and the reasoning around being connected to that professional network are probably just the same for anybody coming into the sector now.
Okay. Brilliant, lovely, thank you, Gill. Yes, so it's interesting to hear. I'm going to tally up the number of years of membership that the three of you do have between you. So thank you very much for that. David, could I ask the same question of you next?
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. I became a student member of CIH because it was deemed to be the thing to do with my studies way back at the turn of 79-80. And I just followed through, got my qualifications. And what struck me immediately was having access to a network of people. At the time, I was living and working in London. And so working with other housing professionals, I soon realised the value of those membership initials was a gateway to an alternative form of education informally. And on my travels out of London and upwards, it's gone with me, and I've been involved with other regional committees or boards, as they're now called. And the ability to exchange, network has followed me. And then suddenly out of the blue in 1992, I was invited, it was drawn to my attention, I should move across now to a fellow as I'd gone up my career grades. And I moved across to a fellow and can't look back. It's been a a facility I've known behind me where I could always ask a question and find somebody to guide me if I had a problem. So yeah, it's been worth it.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, David. Thank you. And Barrington, if I could come to you now with the same question.
Sure. So for the records, 35 years for me. 1991. He sits there staring at the certificate on the wall. So yes, it's been a long journey too for me. It started really almost the same as the other two colleagues I've stated, that back then it was the norm. It was expected that if you wanted to get a senior role in the housing profession, the director of housing or whatever, you'd be expected to be a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing. It was a given. And interestingly, back then, they can't do it now. Job adverts used to say, I call it the golden era. It was a distinct advantage if you're a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing. So it was the expected norm. Phil Davis, Director of Housing, bless him, he's now passed, at the time, came to see me. I was working in Derby City at the time for a housing association, and he was the chair of the local branch, as it was known then. And he was trying to recruit new members. And he said to me, you know, why don't you become a member of the CIH? And so I followed his lead, and I went into branch meetings and regional meetings and webinars and seminars, and I slowly built up my link on. I got my qualification, my chartered membership in '91, and I followed it right through the stages. I'll come to talk about the route to fellowship thereafter, but basically it was what was expected. If you wanted a senior career in the housing profession, you would become a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing. So I followed the crowd in a way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Barrington. Yeah, so lots of really interesting similarities in terms of the journey that you've all taken, and that recognition of the professionalism that's associated with aspiring and achieving fellowship membership of CIH. So thank you very much for that. So just you have touched upon this sort of in your initial answers, but again, this is just a question to all of you. What made you really follow the whole journey through to fellowship? We talked a bit about sort of that expectation and the norm. What would you like to expand upon that in any sort of way? Barrington, could I come to you first on this occasion?
Absolutely. So when I joined what was then called the local branch, it's now a regional board, it was very clear to me that my colleagues, particularly from the BME communities, were very cynical about the CIH as a professional body. They didn't see people that looked like them playing any significant role within the CIH. So when I talked about joining the CIH, people were very dismissive at the time. I then felt that there was something that I needed to do about it. I became chair of the regional board for the Midlands at the time, and I felt that I have to do something more. And Phil said to me, well, you can, but you need to get onto the governing body of the CIH. And if you want to get onto the governing body of the CIH, you have to be a fellow. Again, back then, you had to be a fellow to get nominated, elected, and stand in the national elections and all that sort of stuff. So I then followed that route to get onto the national body, because I honestly felt that I had a role to play and I could help the CIH. I could see that the CIH wanted to do things, didn't know how to, and that I could help steer that strategy and that vision to attract more people from, particularly from BME backgrounds, into the CIH. So I then went through the route to become a fellow, joined, and then joined the national governing body, and eventually in 2005 became president. So that was a big driver for me, wanting to make a difference, and the only way to do it was to become a fellow, to get onto the body that then made those changes.
Lovely, thank you for that, Barrington. Gill, could I go to you with the same question?
Yeah, my answer is less in sort of noble and industrious. I think I haven't ever been part of any of the CIH governing bodies. That's not something I've taken part in up to now. Um, but through and again the terminology has changed. So the Scotland had its own branch and board. So there was quite a lot of just kind of useful networking events. I think that's what I've all picked up on. I think that's one of the brilliant things about the sector um, is the diversity, the support, the understanding, the reality of the jobs we do and the impact we have. So for me, having sort of completed my membership qualifications and become a chartered member in 1995, I think it was about 10 years later, so 2005, that I became a fellow, and really from taking part in sort of CIH Scotland activities, supporting good practice development. So just taking part in working groups and sharing that kind of practical knowledge and experience. And again, just encouraged by mentors that it was a good thing to do. And so to be honest, it was over 20 years ago. The details the details escape me, but I was definitely very much involved in kind of working groups and taking part and sharing good practice and attending events and presenting at events. So I think it kind of came with that. And again, for me, as the guys have said as well, it was a part of your career development that, if you were looking at your own personal development, you're looking at, I'd completed qualifications, I was a member, what's the next step? And certainly for going into more senior management roles, again, I felt it was a really strong demonstration of my commitment to the profession. And just that validation that we keep up and with and share, good practice, and that kind of continuing improvement sort of approach. So for me, that was, it was the next step. It wasn't about becoming an elected member of the Institute or any of that, but it was certainly about strengthening my own kind of career and where it was and where I wanted to be.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Gill. And David, if I could go to you with the same question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was offered fellowship, it did seem a natural progression. And at the time, I was beginning to get involved with a lot of regional discussions. We had a decentralized government, which I think is sort of like returning today as we have a new prime minister. And the civil servants wanted competent, knowledgeable people of the local regional housing scene. And because I was a fellow on the local branch or area committee, I got sucked into a lot of good opportunities to raise with civil servants what was needed in East Anglia. And so it unfolded, that it was like a key. These magical little letters suddenly started to, not only, as others have said, provide educational opportunities, but it was recognized, well, that person's got the experience. And suddenly the idea of mentoring younger people started to evolve. And I've done quite a bit of that over time, which I find very positive, because then I see the younger people coming through the system and still do mentoring today. So, yeah, I think it's an external means to recognize your competence and within the industry.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you. You've all touched upon some lots of similar points, but also lots of varying reasons, and that's really helpful to understand your reasoning and your thought, and talking about things along the lines of that next step and the expectations, at the time in terms of sort of achieving more senior roles. And it's fantastic to hear the mention of mentoring younger housing professionals as well. So, thank you for all of your support in any of those activities that you're doing to support other CIH members and the profession more widely as well. Barrington, and also Barrington as well. Absolutely delighted to hear that you've got your certificate on your wall there in your office. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So Barrington, you've been a member for over 30 years, and you're also a former CIH president. What did you find most useful from your CIH membership through the years of your different stages of your career, and why you then took the step to fellowship? But I think we've covered that aspect in terms of why you've taken this step. But could you sort of think back on your 30 years of membership and sort of pick out some things that to you were really valuable and the reason that sort of support you continuing with your membership?
Sure. It's interesting. Preparing for this actual podcast made me sort of reflect on my 30 odd years as a CIH member, and I sort of look back and I'm thinking, what was it that really excited me back in the early days? And if I'm being open and honest with you, it was the weekly housing publication, because it had the jobs pages at the back, and every Friday, without exception, you got all of, whether it was housing today, inside housing, or HA Weekly, whatever it was, you'll get all of it. You get to the back page, you see all the jobs that were advertised, because if you wanted to find a job, it wasn't online at the time, it was in the housing publication every Friday. So that was one of the big things I actually got out of it in the early days. And it was a really, really useful thing. I think moving through the times, things obviously change. Some of the free events and the regional seminars, as they were known then, now mainly webinars, it kept my CPD going, because I could top up a lot of current thinking and debates and discussions. We talked about the mentoring scheme. I was a mentor for a number of years, because we found out it is one of the most effective way to help people develop their skills, set goals, develop their knowledge, build confidence particularly, and learn new skills. And I found mentoring a very, very useful thing to do. And in a way, I also got involved with alternate route to membership, the executive route, the peer mentoring group route as well. All the different ways of becoming members of the CIH I found quite useful. The other one was around the member networks and the different groups. Networking is a very, very useful thing to do. It kept me in touch with a lot of, in a way, movers and shakers in the sector. Back in the day when you were young and you were just getting into it, you were in awe of, the director of housing of a local authority, and there were these, we didn't have chief execs then much, that came later, but being able to sit in the same room and listen to them talk and debate and network, so that when a job did come up with one of those organizations, you wasn't nervous or scared of meeting the director of fund, because it was somebody you networked with at a CIH event a few weeks ago. So it helped to build your confidence and boost you. And of course, the discounted training was also another big thing for us. Especially, I work for a small organization, and we couldn't afford to send people on lots of training courses. So having that discount and membership to other bodies, like now the Institute of Leadership, for example, was a good one. I think when I was CIH president at the time, the CIH was looking at, because we try to promote recognizing more professions of people who work in housing, whether it's finance, asset management, HR, IT. And one of the things I did at the time was I chaired the first joint CIOB-CIH professional qualification that was trialed at the time. So those type of things I found extremely useful, because it introduced, again, housing to a wider audience who can also become members of it. So I got a lot out of it. There's loads more I could go on, but I will leave some for the others to talk about.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Barrington. David, if I could go to you with that question as well.
Sure. I think once you move through a career, be it a doctor, a solicitor, architect, you get to a point in your career where you have to be recognised by your peer group. And as I think is unfolding, once you get to fellowship, that really is a turning point, because it's not so much how many houses you've built or designed or how many people you've looked after. It's, yeah, the years that you've been and where you've had so many experiences across a region or the country. And I think it is a benchmark, as we would call it now, for competent people. And I've enjoyed, for me, what's highlighted for me during my travels is meeting people, as Barrington and Gill have said, and you learn from other people. And you're not frightened to stand up in front of an audience of 400 or 600. We used to have massive conferences at Harrogate, amazing social scenes, but I won't go down that bit. But standing in front of a huge hall and all you can see is tiny little specks of people, it was confidence. But afterwards, the number of, well, I was going to say emails, but some of it was letters as well at that point, asking for comments, further guidance. Can you share good practice here and there? And so the sharing of good practice from fellows is recognised to be a quality product. And that's followed me throughout my time, and especially now in mentoring and supporting apprentices.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Thank you, David. And Jill, if I could go to you with that same question.
I'm right with Barrington on Inside Housing Weekly and checking the jobs. I think also, and I think when I moved jobs probably quite a number of years ago, I do remember clearing out a kind of box file full of inside housings that I'd kept with, you know, highlighters or post-its of good practice that were just, you know, useful articles or useful contacts. And just similar to what David's saying, you know, appearing at conferences or presenting just generated that kind of that connection with people who might have worked in really different organizations. So again, you know, learning from organizations that were, you know, maybe significantly bigger or had very different sort of housing issues that they were dealing with. So I think that the kind of the information sharing and I guess for all of us on the call, probably those experiences when things really were in paper or, you know, were delivered and lettered. You know, I say to younger colleagues about the advent of emailing and, you know, they just, it's a different world. But I think the experiences and the things that sit at the core of that are about, you know, being connected to the sector. I think, and again, something Barrington picked up there is the diversity of what we do in housing. So I've been really, really fortunate. I started my career in policy and research. I kind of decided if I was going to do that, I probably needed a bit more frontline experience. So I went into housing management and senior roles, operational management roles. I moved organisation into one that had more care and support, specific housing for older people, rural housing, and again, through the institute, through the good practice, through the networks, it's really easy to track people down and tap them for information or for, you know, experience, or be part of those forums or networks that have got those, you know, slightly different kind of skills or knowledge areas. So particularly when we went through remodeling housing for older people, there were loads of really good organisations and brilliant colleagues who I'd either seen present at events or I could access through the kind of Institute of Housing network that helped us. And now I've moved into a kind of business transformation role. Again, the resources now that are available through the website, through webinars, through free events, it's so diverse. It helps across the spectrum, and I think that's one of the things that is so great about housing. It does involve technology. We could be talking about building safety, climate change, AI implementation, you know, EDI. So that the scope of it is really interesting, and that the fact that the Institute and our members cover and have skills and you know, detailed knowledge and information across such a vast kind of, you know, when you talk about housing, it's it's in everybody's lives, and the range of roles and involvement that we have as housing professionals. Behind that is all of this knowledge that is accessible, and the skills, the learning are so willingly shared as well. So I think that's something that always comes across, both in the accessibility through the Institute of Housing website, through the networks that we have, through the regional, national kind of membership models, that at a tap now, you don't have to wait to a highlighted version of Inside Housing where something might have been mentioned. It's like that resource is available on tap, if on such a broad range of housing related issues. So yeah, I think that is something that is probably kind of maybe people don't reflect or convey, that it's such a broad amount of activity that goes on related to housing, that the knowledge, the experience, and the willingness to share has always been fantastic.
Wonderful, thank you, Gill. Barrington, can I just come to you with a particular question that you might have or an observation?
Yeah, it was something that Gill said that triggered something that I feel very strongly about. I started off wanting to become a scientist, a biochemist, and my journey into becoming a housing professional is an interesting one. But what I found out and what I discovered when I was CIH president was just how many people got into housing by accident, quote unquote. It was not what they'd set out to do when they were in school. What are you going to be? I'm going to become a scientist, an architect, a doctor, whatever. Nobody said, I want to become a housing professional. So for me, it was a major issue that needed to be tackled. When I was president, one of my themes for the year was about making housing a career of choice. And that took me up to Gen 2 Group in Sunderland. And what they had was an initiative called Community Kids. And what they had was their staff would go out as part of, we now call it social value, corporate social responsibility. But each of their staff members would go out to local communities and in the schools with the children and talk about everything and anything from truancy to what's the latest going on with the local football team, to bullying, to what would you like to do when you leave school. But what it did was it built up a relationship between the housing organization and the local communities. And for me, we as a sector sit and wait for people to come to us rather than reach out and say, we are here. And I think housing organizations need to do more of reaching out. Some do it, to be fair, but not enough of us do that. Reach out to local communities, local schools, the universities, and so forth, and actually start to build that relationship so people realize it's a vast area in terms of what you can do as a career in housing. It's not just about housing management. So that was the point I actually wanted to make, that we as a sector, housing organizations and CIH need to reach out more. Number of initiatives have been started, but they didn't seem to last long. But we need to continue that to get the message out to the wider world about housing as a career.
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything that you've all said. And I think it's so key that as a sector and as a profession, we all play our own individual and collective parts in taking the opportunity to raise housing as a career of choice and raise awareness of it as a career of choice. And by us all working together to be able to do that, we will have more success, won't we, in terms of the things that we were able to implement. The legacy of Ellie Holt's presidential campaign still carries on with the Choose Housing work that we do at CIH. So if there are any opportunities or anything that we can support the three of you and other members with resources and so on to be able to do that, then please do shout. We have got the toolkit that is available. So really glad that we've sort of had the opportunity to talk about making sure that we work together to raise the profile of housing as a career of choice. So thank you both for raising that. David, I'm going to turn to you now with a specific question. So mentioned earlier on that you are now a life member of CIH, which means that you've achieved your 50 years of CIH membership, and I know it might be either a year or two more than that now. So the biggest congratulations to you on that achievement. But if we just sort of take that into account, can you just outline to me, what does that mean to you? What does having over 50 years of CIH membership actually mean to you? And why has it been so important to retain your membership during all of that time?
Thank you for such a loaded question. It's been a long journey, but it's the commitment to the cause. I feel that when I started out, I thought I might become an environmental health officer, but I didn't like the smells. So strange as it is, I moved into the adjacent department, housing. And when I realized how to get qualified in that industry, I didn't recognize the growth and the scale of the way the housing industry was going to grow. Colleagues have alluded now that it isn't just about housing management and rents. It's about asset bases, financial planning, business development opportunities, working with the commercial sector. And there's another skill set that you can only acquire after years experiencing some of those challenges. And as you go up the ladder, it does eventually feel like a glove, the fellowship, because to get to a CE role, you need to have this wide raft of relevant experience so you can build, manage, and finance an organization in simple terms. But I do think, as we've mentioned already, one of the key things is the flow of information. And we're in an industry, especially the last 2 years, where changes are coming through so frequently. It isn't just a question of reading or looking at one source of information. And I think the CIH, through its policy team, actually hoovers up a lot of these challenges and feeds it through, and we can contribute. And I feed into the CIH supply and development team, looking at future house building. And it is interesting that we've got staff who've got a whole raft of skills and sets. And one little example I will share was I went on a CIH study tour to Germany, and there I found solar panels hanging off of balconies. And I was just amazed how they were increasing solar energy there. And as it happens, 18 months ago, I raised this with the relevant person at CIH, and now it's fell into the new standards. We will move to hanging solar panels off balconies. So from one observation, feeding it through the network, it becomes practice and law, and this will unfold out. So, I just feel I've contributed in various ways. But I think the key thing, which I don't think we've mentioned yet, is the way we can reshape or build new communities. And that I get a buzz out. I get a buzz out of it because I enjoy change, reshaping a staff or gently reshaping an area with new housing and facilities, and seeing it achieved to be a cohesive, sustainable community, I think is a product we should all be proud of, and we're doing a lot of that now. So, yes, standards have changed in my period of working in housing, and I continue to enjoy my membership because one of my current roles is helping CIH consider housing apprenticeships. So this morning I was in Blackburn talking to apprentices who were trying to move up the ladder. And by doing this sort of work, I travel the country talking from Cornwall to Adrian's Wall. And sadly, the supply-demand argument doesn't go away, but just sharing briefly, well, have you tried mentoring? Have you got a CPD, continuous professional development log? And ensuring they are self-motivating, ensuring that they are self-developing, I think comes from some point of experience. So, yeah. Plus, on my journeys, I have to get it in. It was on the 3rd of November 2004. Barrington and I shared a platform in Boston, Bedfordshire, a regional conference where I first met him. He's probably forgotten now, but he had a black moustache, not a grey one now. But it's those sort of opportunities, you capture. Yeah.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, David. Yes, and congratulations again on your 50 years plus of CIH membership. So I'm just going to finish off with just one very last sort of quick fire question to you all. What one thing would you say to other chartered members of CIH who may be considering that next step to fellowship? Gill, could I go to you first, please?
I think if you become a sort of chartered member and you know that the housing profession is where you're at and where you want to be, the opportunity to become a fellow is, I think, something that you should just grasp and see that as another bit of your personal development. But also, I think most of us have come into the profession accidentally or otherwise because of the social purpose. And I think the fact that we share good practice, we network, we support each other, that just, elevating that status as a fellow is a kind of two-way street, isn't it? It's about feeling that validation for your own personal development, but also trying to, give back in whatever way, contribute to the movement, because as David says, the impact that we have across communities is what motivates us to turn up, and the impact that the housing sector has in wider society, we absolutely know is really significant. So I think that feeling of both the benefits and the contributions, I think is what motivated me at the time, which maintains my ongoing membership. And for people who are members, is to take the next step.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Gill. Thank you. And thank you for talking about that, the two-way street, absolutely, in terms of the benefits to you as an individual member, but also what you're able to give back for the greater good. So thank you. Barrington, can I go to you with the same question, please?
Yeah, sure. For me, being a fellow is probably the highest professional recognition within the housing profession, maybe other than lifetime membership, that you can achieve. And what that does, it says that you are, as a professional, looking to work to the highest recognized standards. I talked about the previous golden era of adverts saying, having a CIH qualification is a distinct advantage. It's gone full circle, and I remember the days when, and David will remember this, when the CIH used to lament that nobody talks about being a member of the CIH professional to come into housing. Anybody can come into housing. It's gone full circle, and it's almost like someone's answered our prayers, and they've said professional standards is now saying you need to demonstrate professional standards, folks, if you want to be remaining in this sector. So seizing that opportunity, if you become a fellow, you're actually demonstrating that you're at the highest level of that professional standard as a professional person. And therefore, for me, that's the ultimate status to demonstrate your commitment to housing, your commitment to continuous professional development, and your commitment to continuing to move in this sort of direction that everyone dream about, but never sometimes quite get there. Being a fellow for me just sums all of that up. So I would encourage anyone, you only get what you put in. Too often people become members and don't do anything else. They don't go to the events, they don't go to anything, and then they wonder why they get nothing out of it. And if you put more into it, you get a lot more out of it. And being a member as a fellow helps to actually push that agenda to the highest level. So by all means, just as they say, just do it, because you will actually benefit a lot from being a fellow.
Brilliant. Thank you, Barrington. And David, yourself?
Well, I would endorse everything my colleagues have said so far. And looking forward, if I may, I think the industry from the 1st of October this year is going to go through a slight evolution with the introduction of the new competence and conduct standards, which means if you do wish to run an organisation, you will have to obviously get interviewed and get into the job. But if you're up to date with your studies and CPD, fellowship would be a step in the way. But there is going to be a requirement for employers to check that their directors and chief executives are got the competence and the conduct to run organisations. We haven't mentioned the immortal problem of Grenfell Tower, but this is where it all stems from. We have got to now shift the basis on which the top hierarchy run organisations. And I think in promoting fellowship, if people can embark on a fellowship, it will ease the transition into the executive role, and then ensure that they're keeping competent and hopefully displaying the right conduct that both Barrington and Gill have mentioned this afternoon. So yeah, onwards and upwards. There's still more work to be done.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, everybody. So I think we've come to a close now, and I just want to say thank you to all of you as my guests for today's podcast, and thank you to everybody that is listening to this podcast. Please do tune in to our next podcast on the CIH website or on our YouTube channel. Also, if this podcast has also made you curious about CIH Fellowship, please do visit the CIH website, where you'll be able to find details about the eligibility criteria and how to apply. So thank you all.